So that being said, I'm just going to get into the toms. There's nothing crazy going on with the toms here. I've already edited out all the bleed, as you probably heard if you went through the tracks. I just go through and do what's and just basically mute anything that isn't a part where the tom's being played. So I'll just bring up these tom faders to 0. They're going through the drum bus, but not the bright bus, and there's nothing on them right now. But I'm gonna find a part in the song where he hits all 3 toms. For some reason, when I prep this, I pan these hard 100% each way, but I'm not really a fan. And also, I don't know why I did that, because these are 2 rack toms. So I'm going to pan 180.
To LCR?
What's that?
You're not into LCR panning?
Yes, for most things, but not necessarily for toms. I kind of like to push the volume of my toms, and I think toms sound, as a drummer, like your rack tom isn't where your hi-hats are, you know what I mean? So like if the rack tom sounds even further left than the hi-hats, that's a really strange sound to me. So with toms, I keep things a little more towards the center.
Got it.
Drummer perspective always, because the only people that care are drummers. So I always mix drummer perspective. The video guys welcome to flip the audio for the music video if it needs to be the other way around, but for the most part, I really prefer drummer's perspective. Those toms sound pretty cool. I'm going to bring in an EQ and see if I can get anything else that I like out of them. Also, something I didn't do earlier, but I usually do, and it's usually just pre-done, is I solo safe my 2 dry buses, or sorry, my dry drum bus and my first drum bus crush, which means I'm holding command and hitting the S. And it means that when I solo any track it's going into, I don't have to solo it. It's basically already soloed. And that way, like when I'm listening to the toms here, they're just going through the buses. Otherwise, if I didn't solo safe it, I would have to do this. So as you can see, I've done some kind of minor EQ moves just to get, they were already pretty full sounding, but there was like a little bit of a high mid snap that was annoying. And so I cut that out, which looked like it was about 3.5K, and I've cut out about 5 dB of that, and it's a little bit wider Q, so it's not exactly 4.8 dB or whatever. Then I've added just a little bit of 6K, and I am cutting out a little bit of 1K, and then I've just high passed some of the rumbly frequencies that aren't necessary for a 10-inch tom. I'm going to see if I can get away with adding a little 200, because I love 200. It's a little muddy, maybe 150. like that that's a little fatter and fuller. Now, because I use the same mics on all toms, I'm first going to check whether all 3 toms can use the same EQ. A lot of times rack toms can match perfectly, and the floor tom you have to adjust a little bit because you get more head sound than actual shell tone because it's tuned so low. It'll get like brighter and snappier, but sometimes it's fine. Depends on the heads too. I think there's just too much low end on the floor tom for now. Maybe a hair too much low end on the rack. I think a lot of that snappiness that I cut out of the high tom doesn't need to be as gutted in the other 2 toms. So that sounds pretty cool. I'm on the right track there. So another thing I like to do that can add some snap to toms and is kind of along the same lines as the crush bus, but it's a little bit different because toms react differently, is I'll use this Vertigo VSM3 plugin. It's their satellite. It's pretty cool. The real thing is really cool too, but honestly, it's a Brainworks has some really good plugins that honestly sound really close to the real thing, and I like this plugin. It's one of the rare plugins that I think is actually equally as cool but slightly different than the real thing. So because it's kind of complicated, I have this preset that I've made because I cannot dive into what all this stuff does, because I honestly just, the first time I bought it, I messed around with it a bunch until I came up with a sound I liked, and it was just trial and error for like 3 hours, and you don't want to watch me go through all that trial and error again. So I'm going to start with a preset that I made called Kick and Snare, but I often use for toms. And the key is that I've set up all these, all the like settings for each band, and then I really just mess with the mix control, which is called THD, which mixes the bands. So this is the low band, and this is the high band. And I have the mix set right now at 30% on both of them, which is a pretty good starting spot. I put that on the floor tom, but I'll actually put it on the rack tom, the high rack, the 10. So this is without. This is with. Adds a little punch. It's actually not doing a lot. So let me put this up to like 50%. See how much more lively it sounds with it on? It's pretty cool with it off. I know the volume's a little louder too. I'll try to turn this down. Volume was like almost the same there, but it sounds so much louder with the Vertigo on, which is cool. And something I like to keep in mind, that if I can get something sounding louder without like limiting the crap out of it or making it sound messed up or messing up the attack, it always feels good to have something that's perceived louder but actually is a little bit quieter, because I know that if everything is that way, I can build up to a louder overall mix because I'm keeping my ceiling down, or I'm keeping my headroom up, I guess, by keeping the level down, but the perceived loudness is there, and that's how things get forward and kind of fit into a mix. Because it's always weird when something looks really loud. Everyone's experienced this, where something looks really loud, but it doesn't sound that loud, and I'm always trying to do the opposite of that, because if you have a bunch of stuff that is really loud but doesn't sound loud, then you're just going to end up with this mix that's muddy and isn't even capable of getting loud. So if you want your mix to end up loud in the end, it's great to make sure your sounds all like sound in your face and they sound loud, but they aren't getting louder. So you can see the peak's pretty similar on this tom, and it's everything. It's like even down to the toms, as nerdy as it sounds. And to me, with it sounds a lot louder. It sounds a lot cooler. So again, I'm going to put this on all 3 toms, see if the same settings work. starts with. And I like that. I'm going to turn the overall volume up just a little bit. And here I'm doing exactly what I said not to do, and I'm turning up each one individually. Then let me just listen to another part in the song and make sure that wasn't some specific thing to that one hit, because these aren't samples. Every hit is a little different, played a little different in different sections. Sounds good. Just gonna look for one more spot in the song where he hits toms. I can actually tab to transient on the tom track to get to the next part. Sounds cool for now. A little dry. We'll add some reverb to him.